evening, everybody. Good night, or no, good evening, I think is what you say when you say hello.
Talking Dirty
with Maestro.
Not just numbers,
Not just stats.
it's about what they mean.
I'm going to send to you the information.
Talking Dirty.
Hello, and welcome to Talkin Durty with your boy. Me. Again, I want to thank everybody for reaching out again, and welcoming me back as we get into the race to one, breaking down this season, what's going on. Looking forward to this week. I'll be back on some games. Woohoo! Just go on and get out your gin and juice, baby. Apple juice, of course. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay, there we go. Last week was a big change in how we see, how we look at, how we deal with the universe of college basketball. With the women's game getting so much more attention than the men's game. And all kinds of reasons for that have been going around, been said by a lot of people, and that's okay. That's cool. That's but nothing happens in a vacuum. And I say nothing happens in a vacuum because there's never a singularity when it comes to these sorts of things. One, it's been coming for a while. And two, the relationship of what college basketball means now to the greater community has changed. With the idea now, the advent of the one and done player sort of started to take away from the history of the game, the history of the blue blood teams as they're normally talked about or discussed. And the relationship of these teams in the placement of history has also changed. And that's fair. It's going to happen. Now we have the greater idea of parity versus dynasty, with the better players leaving earlier. The players that remain on the current college teams are more balanced. So we're seeing the 16 defeating the 1. We're seeing things like that starting to happen. And that's cool because now it's really back in a lot of ways the period of the game. Unfortunately, though, it's happening at a time where most of the audience needs to have the star, because stars mean storylines. Storylines means clicks, impressions, attention. Which leads me to point number 3, stars versus teams. The idea of if Duke basketball is on, or Kentucky basketball is on, or Georgetown basketball is on, all those stories have now changed because of the teams that no matter where they are, if they get that player that everyone knows is going to be one and done, that team is going to get more attention, whether it's the University of Georgia, whether it's Baylor, whether it's Marquette, wherever. That's where the attention is going to go. And the blue bloods that might not have that same star dynasty power because they recruited for long term, we don't really hear about them until it comes down time for the tourney. All that is okay. Now, what does this have to do with the women's game getting more attention? Because we get more of the storylines now. We get the storylines, we get the stars, and we get the franchises. Just in this past year, of course, the stories of Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, Juju Watkins, Paige Beckers, Cameron Brooke, all those players, they've meant something to their teams, and that has now reset how these teams in the game is now looked at. But my argument, that I've not heard is this. It is not about the women's game getting better. The women's game has been good, and yes, it's getting better in its way. but it's about the game itself around the world getting better and more balanced. We're starting to see players from other countries that are not necessarily known as basketball countries and becoming more influential and more emplaced in terms of how we look at and how we see what's going on with the current embodiment of college basketball or basketball in general. We're starting to see how these places can now play out their game across the table before it was only a United States centric, one particular part of the country centric game. And that's not happening anymore. So my argument here is women's college basketball is basically taking its place, or women's basketball in general is now taking its place along with basketball in the world. It is a better game, and the game across the table is better, so more and more people are going to pay attention to it across the table. That's Maestro's argument. Tell me what you think. Tell me how you see it. Tell me what's going on with you. And you know what's up. Catch me on the link.
Thank you for listening to the Maestro. Want to get involved? Bring it.
Drop in discord.gg/SimWorld Hoops.
If you have the brain, join as a coach. If you have the game,
join as a player.
see the game,
Be
be the
the
game.
game.
Now, back to the Maestro.
Sorry. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. And welcome back to Talkin' Dirty with your boy. A few things on the top of the table that I want to bring to the conversation about how the game is looked at from what we talked about in the first half. And as always, want your feedback. You know what's up. Tell me what you think. Upward mobility in women's basketball was more of a rocket ship at one particular point as the game started to gain more TV eyes and internet eyes. When basketball started making the media transition and you started seeing colleges having their games played on the internet, women's basketball game was where it was placed because a lot of networks didn't want to touch the women's game because they didn't feel they were going to get the ratings that they thought they were going to get. And how do I know this? I have nearly 3,000 college basketball games over the course of a few years recorded because I was able to record the games directly from the internet. I was able to actually download the games directly from the internet. That's part of the university's broadcast. There was no paywall. There was nothing like that. I was able to just, boom, go there and do it. Then as I moved forward, and then I just started using my position as assistant GM or prospective GM for franchises, things like that, I would just simply ask for an entire season of games. And I would get 3 and 4 and 5 seasons from nearly hundreds of colleges. Now, what that meant was my focus was primarily on the college game. Not that I was ever full-time in that position, that it was women's basketball. I was able to move very easily from JUCO, 4-year, WNBA, European Pro League, and even high school recruiting gigs in a matter of months. And that was not being full-time. I'd be called in as a consultant. I'd be called in as someone that they wanted me to put my eyes on a player or whatever. Unlike in the men's game where that upward mobility was more like a tree growing, where it wasn't unusual for a person to be a 20-year assistant on a team before they got a shot at one of the associate or even head coaching jobs, because there were so many people vying to be there. And I share that to say this. So over the course, coaching JUCO women's basketball, interviewing for an assistant job in the WNBA, being hired as a consultant for a new WNBA franchise, and then being hired as a consultant for a franchise that was looking to move from one city to another in the WNBA, that for me happened in the span of 2.5 months. Yes, 2.5 months. What I noticed was this, like there were players that I saw that I will say I was completely right about. Like I knew they were going to make it. I knew they were going to make it on any level of basketball, no matter where they did. If they were able to stay in the States, great. If not, with the advent of the internet, they would be followed even if they went over to play pro ball full time in Europe. And then there were players that I thought that had the talent that I completely missed on. One, she caught me. She basically said, I have no interest in playing full time. This is why. I'm going to move on to a professional career. I don't feel like doing that hustle, because she had close friends who had tried to play pro ball in the ABL, then the WNBA, then in Europe, and they were miserable. Another player was just more interested in being a model than she was being a player, and she all but told me so. But everyone else, it was sort of easy to sort of nail that down, because you could see where the game was going as we started seeing these incredible leaps in women's abilities. To take it back, the days of Cheryl Miller being one of only 2 or 3 or 4 high-level women players became the oddity, where it started becoming more common to see what we see now, where now you could probably name 20, 25 women players that you could see could make an impact on the WNBA level. And that relationship, notwithstanding, means a few things. It truly means where that balance in the game that we talked about in the first half is translated across the table, not just in the ears or in the minds of people who now study and watch the game, but it's starting to play out in how the games are being observed, how we're starting to see the eyes getting on the game being more balanced across the men's and women's game. In this particular case, women's game, because of the 2 superstars that were being looked at highly in the Final Four, garnered a lot of attention, yes, but it also happened even through the finals. And that relationship, to me, goes back to the very first conversation that we had, that back in the day of basketball games, or college basketball games being presented to the general public, they were being presented, for women anyway, were being presented more on the internet than the men's games that always had at least some local television network to play them. And that sustainability has sort of become a common through thread to allow that particular part of the game to not have to change. And that's cool, right? Take advantage of it, make it work. Like the other argument I made on another show years ago in the birth of NIL. I said women athletes are going to benefit more from NIL than men athletes because of the sellability of the woman athlete. And that's indeed has been the case. You see more and more women across the sports landscape having huge NIL deals, where we see a few college football players and a very few college basketball players having great deals. But in the overall scheme of things, if you line up the top 200, a large percentage of that are going to be women athletes because they sell more across the table. This is awesome. Why? Because eventually one day we look forward to not having to say the differences in the men's and women's game is nothing but who's playing it. We won't have to talk about quality. We won't have to talk about other things. We can enjoy it for what it is. And for that day, I personally just cannot wait. It's going to be nice. It's going to be nice to see. Again, I want to thank everybody for welcoming me back. I want to hear what you think. You know what's up. Holla at your boy. Let me know how you think about these things. And I can't wait to hop in on the season this week. Got my first call coming up in a while. Gonna be ready for it. Make sure you don't have to call EMS to drag me out the booth. All right. Looking forward to everything. Again, appreciate y'all. Love you. And no matter whatever you do, just remember, if you're gonna eat peanut butter and jelly, you have to be sure that you take the bread.
Like, I need to talk to somebody.
Thank you for listening to Maestro.
Thank you again for checking out Maestro. Drop a tag below and give us a piece of your mind. See you next time.
Well, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day.